One, two, three, boom, and we're live. Hello, folks. Good morning, good day, good afternoon, wherever you are. How did we end up with this live stream? I'm very excited to have you all here watching, listening, and hopefully coding along also. And I just want to give you a bit of background info. Now, I got over the years, I got a bit tired of in technology, all these discussions, arguments, framework wars, religion, how to do things right, how to do things wrong, what's going on, how to build software and whatnot. And at the same time, it's also that rarely do people want to be looked over the shoulder while they're building something, while not everything is perfect, and they just want to show off the perfect result. So I thought it would be quite cool if you could just watch someone build something while it's not perfect, unscripted, real life, and we built something from the very scratch to the very end. So we're going to deploy something to a server at the very end. As I like dogfooding, it's very important I thought of what could we build, what is not just a simple hello world application. So not just, having some calculator, something technical, abstract, whatever. By the way, hi guys joining. So when I'm looking over to the right side, I'm just having a look at the chat, seeing what's happening. And because I want to keep this stream a bit both ways, not just me spreading out info to the world, but also, having a look at the questions, interact with you and all that kind of stuff. But back to the program we're going to build, I thought, let's build something with skin in the game. So let's have a payment form. Because it moves money, it is important that when you enter your credit card numbers, that you get billed the correct amount. It's something you can actually build in 1 hour or 2 hours. People can use it. And it is a very nice example of a real world live application without a ton of technology, without a ton of, Kubernetes, a ton of all these stuff. We're just going to build a pragmatic, modern, simple application, which we can build upon in our next sessions, hopefully. Right? And for all the guys asking if this will be available to watch later on, yes, the recording will be available to watch later on. You can join me in just coding along, basically. You need an IDE, you need Java installed, and you need a Stripe account. You can register a Stripe account in almost every country, and you can just sign up with the email address, and you will get test credentials, which will make it very simple to just follow me along. You don't have to have a live Stripe account to do this, what we're doing. Right. And I think that is the intro. I'm already down for the next sessions. I like that, Tenson. Yes, yeah. Because to be honest, a payment integration is something that can take ages. So basically weeks if you haven't done a payment integration before, especially if you talk about testing, all that kind of stuff, because it's not a very simple, straightforward thing to do. But before I get into the depths of it, let me show you what we're going to build one by one. So this is the end result, a very simple payment page. So welcome to Transparent Software Developer. You will be billed some amount of money when you fill out this form and when you hit that button down here. You can enter your email address and you can enter your credit card number, a Visa credit card number. You have an expiry date. And I guess most of you are familiar with credit card payment forms, basically. So you just hit pay, and that's everything we're going to do for now. A simple payment form. This is on localhost 8080. It's just a simple form. That's what's going to look like, what's going to happen at the end of our session. I have, however, a website, live.marcobela.com. You can actually go to it. You'll see there's a 502, a bad gateway, because we're going to build something from scratch. We're going to build a deployable jar file, upload it to that server, and then hopefully you'll be able to go to the website, enter your credit card details, pay, make me a happy man. And then we have our fully working project available, basically. Just having a quick look at the hello guys. Just having a quick look at the questions. You can use any IDE that you want to follow me along. I'm going to use IntelliJ IDEA because I've been a long time IntelliJ user. I'm going to use the IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate Edition also. But I will tell you once something is not available in the free community edition, features and functionality I'm using in the Ultimate Edition. Does that sound fair? Right. Then I think we can give it a go. And yes, it is. I also like the Kickstarter ID Tensan, basically. Yeah, let's see if at the end of this stream, you basically like seeing what I did and fill out your credit card details here and hit the pay button. But now let's not take too much away for now. So there's one tiny thing. There's a bit before we start rushing straight into development implementation, there's a tiny bit of details about how these payment forms work, which you need to know, some theory. And you're going to be happy because, as I said, if you start out from scratch, it's going to take you a couple of days, a couple of weeks reading about Stripe, about different payment forms, about different payment flows. And I'm trying to condense all of that into basically a couple of minutes before we start working with it. When you hit that pay button, when you enter your credit card details here and your CVC and whatever, and you hit that pay button, your credit card data never touches my server. It's a very important concept. So it goes directly, the browser talks directly with Stripe so that I do not have your credit card details and I cannot do anything with those details. So I hit pay and Stripe gets contacted. The interesting thing is my server does only get notified of the payment by a webhook from Stripe. So it's an asynchronous payment workflow, basically. So browser sends something to Stripe and Stripe sends back to my server, which makes it very interesting if you're building wizards when you hit pay and then you want to get redirected to a different page in the same application. But again, that's something which we might have a look at in the next episode, basically. And even more so, when you hit pay, there's actually two things involved. And for that, let me just search for Stripe Accept Payments. There is a pretty good documentation page, which you should open up, could open up. And it will explain you in detail how Stripe payments work. Just a quick note, if you're following me along, if you're searching for Stripe Accept Payments, accept a payment, there are basically two payment workflows. Pre-built checkout page, which means whenever you pay something, you will be redirected to a Stripe specific page and then redirected back to your application. That's not what I want to do. Instead, I want to use a custom payment flow. I want to be in-app and you have my own checkout page. And just because I saw that, Quentin, will I follow a TDD methodology? The interesting thing is, Stripe, there's a ton of stuff to integrate with. And one of those things, what I'm keen on, if you start with Stripe, there is literally no way, I've never seen anyone start with TDD from scratch. What we're going to do is we're going to get used to the Stripe API, work with that, get something working because it's not so easy to get something working. And then we talk about tests in the next episodes, basically. Yes, or you already implemented it. So yeah, we're going to have a look at tests in the next episodes. Right. Back to, however, the payment workflow. Let me make that a tiny bit bigger for you. I mentioned already the customer goes to the client and the client talks with Stripe. It's not entirely true. There's actually two pieces to it. I go to the payment page, so I go to this page. Now, in the background, what actually happens is that the page sends a request to my server, so to the service we're going to build. And my server sends a request to Stripe saying, hey, there's a user who intends to buy something. I need to create a so-called payment intent. So there's a user on my site, and he's about to spend like 10 euros. Stripe says, well, okay, here's a new payment intent, and I give you a secret ID. Back to the browser. So when I open up that page here, I have a secret ID already from Stripe that I'm about to pay something. And when I hit that pay button now, then there's the second step happening. I hit pay, there's some JavaScript happening. JavaScript confirms a payment with that client secret I got in the first step and some card details. The payment is done. and then the payment either works or it doesn't work. That happens directly with Stripe. And then we're already finished with the payment form. And then we need to care about later the webhook, where we get an event back from Stripe saying, hey, a payment happened, do something about it. So for example, unlock a video, unlock an ebook, give the user customer account status, whatever. But this is what we have to take care of for now. What's the benefit? A quick question from Joseph. What's the benefit of coding it so that it's on your own server than on your Stripe payment page? The benefit is if you want to integrate with multiple payment providers, for example, if you want to integrate with PayPal, with Stripe, someone else, it is actually a nice exercise to do everything inside of your app. So the user can just click a button and say, hey, I want to pay now, instead of being redirected to different providers. Obviously, being redirected to Stripe's page, to PayPal's page, whatever, also works. But it is actually quite cool, just like on my website, to be in the app, to not leave anything and just push a button, and then you can essentially pay. So it's a user experience thing. And just asking the client secret, yes, it's unique. Whenever a user is about to pay, then Stripe needs to give you a payment intent with the client secret. It's unique to that purchase, basically. All right. So then I think what I would do is, even if I had to implement this in a legacy application, if I had to implement it new, basically, I would always create a tiny proof of concept project, because I never worked with the API before. Well, I did in this case, but you might not have worked with the API before. And I would just want to have a tiny project, a tiny Spring Boot project in this case, where I can play with the HTML form, where I can play with the JavaScript, where I can play with my server, with my backend. And that's when we start the real development. So as I mentioned, feel free to code along, open up your IDE, and we can get started. So this is actually my plan B. If nothing works with what I'm about to do, I coded this once. If nothing works, we'll just have to look at that source code, but we're actually going to start entirely from scratch. So just in IntelliJ, new project, right? And this is maybe a tiny difference already. In IntelliJ Community Ultimate, I can already go to Spring Initializer here and create my Spring Boot project straight out of IntelliJ. If you do not have IntelliJ Ultimate, then please go to start.spring.io, open up the Spring Initializer homepage, and just create a project like I'm doing here in IntelliJ. One of the tiny convenience features in IntelliJ. Right. I'm going to call this com Markobela artifact Stripe payments, maybe. Right. I'm going to make it a Maven project. Again, if people want to use a Gradle project, that's also fine with me. I'm just want to keep it simple now. Just going to go with Maven. I'm also going to go with Java. By no means you have to do that. Go with Kotlin, go with Groovy, whatever you feel comfortable with. Packaging, yes, a jar file. We want to just deploy a jar file. No Docker, no Kubernetes, no nothing. Just a jar file containing our code. Java version 11 sounds about right, because I don't know if Java 15 is installed on my server. Otherwise, we could have used Java 15, but 11 is absolutely fine. The version is fine. Stripe payments are fine. Yeah, that looks about right. Now, and by the way, if someone now thinks this is what is Spring Boot? Unfortunately, it's not really a what is Spring Boot or what is Spring and whatever. If you want to know what Spring Boot is, if you're a complete beginner, you might appreciate the guides on my site. I also link them in the description of the stream. But this is more about how you would professionally build such an application, right? Now, I'll go with the dev tools, right? Just as a default. I know I need to build web services, basically a website, right? So some REST services. I also want Thymeleaf as a template engine. I want Spring Data JDBC, right? We're not going to use JPA for now. I'm just going to keep it really simple, just with some Spring Data JDBC. I want an H2 database. I want a MySQL driver, because in production we're going to use a MySQL database, even though I'm not quite sure if we're going to make it to using a database in this session. But still, we have the dev tools, we have web, Thymeleaf, Spring Data JDBC. I think we can add whatever we need actually later on, if there's still something we need. Now let's create that project. And as you can see, it is a really straightforward Spring Boot application from scratch. There's nothing inside. You can just run your Spring application and you're good to go. Now, how would we start in real life? How would we start with Stripe? And by the way, just Michael, yes, white theme. It is a white theme because a lot of people complain about the black theme, about the dark theme when watching my videos. So that's why I actually put the white theme on, even though I'm usually on the black theme, on the dark theme. So I guess you'll have to live with that somewhat. Right. When you start out with Stripe, just like I did, what you're going to do is essentially you're going to read it. You need a tutorial. I mentioned already there's a gazillion workflows to integrate with Stripe. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up actually a different page, stripe.com, go to developers, accept online payments, right? And here you'll find a link saying accept online payments. And the beauty is you can choose, well, what front-end technologies to use. We're just going to go with HTML and plain JavaScript. We're not going to add React just now. Again, we're going to be pragmatic. The backend, we're going to write it in Java. If you're not from Java crowd, you can also use Ruby, Python, PHP.NET. That will actually work flawlessly. That's not going to be a big issue. Again, we're using the custom payment flow, so we're going to be in my application, not on the Stripe application. And then Stripe gives me a pretty long tutorial of what I essentially need to do to integrate with Stripe. And for you, if you have a Stripe account, if you're logged in, you can simply follow that tutorial on your own time later on after I finish that video and get everything working. So it's not just my stream, but you can also always go through that tutorial basically. Now, just roughly checking out, because going through every line of the tutorial would take a bit too much time. But just having a look at what we roughly need to do. So set up the server. That sounds a bit like, yes, our Spring Boot application, right? Where we need to create that payment intent I talked about earlier. Then we need a checkout page. Yes, that's the HTML page the user is going to see, where we need some JavaScript, our payment form, right? And then complete the payment on the client. This is some JavaScript, which sends everything to Stripe, basically, right? And then step number 4 is already testing the integration. So it seems to be pretty straightforward. Hopefully, let's see. Stripe gives you the code for every integration you have. So I have a server.java file here, which seems to be a Spark server. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but I'm trying to go through it and trying to understand what's happening there, basically. So I have my server here, and I see some classes. There seems to be a create payment intent DTO. There seems to be a create payment response DTO. Yeah, that looks about right. Some calculate order amount. Yeah, that also looks to be right. And there seems to be a main method. So that is basically what my Spring application, my Spring Boot application is doing. And in that main method, the only thing that really happens is I seem to have a handler method for posts. So there's an endpoint being called create payment intent. That seems to be the browser calls this endpoint, and this endpoint has to call Stripe to create the payment intent. So I'll tell you what, I'm just gonna copy the whole thing, just like so. I'm gonna go back and a bit of, let's say, what's it called? Not convenience, but convention. I'm just going to put my controllers in the controller package, and we can argue about that in a bit also. So I'm just going to have my payment controller, right? It's going to be, I know it's going to be a REST controller. And let me not just paste that in here, but I know I need a post mapping. I'm not entirely sure at the moment what this method is going to return, right? But I'm just going to post everything inside here for now. Right, this looks like my post mapping could need a URL, like so. Create payment intent. We can get rid of that. We don't need to set a response type with Spring. And then I see some manual conversion going on. They try to use JSON, which is not Jackson, to convert whatever the browser sends to a create payment class. And at the end, they convert everything that Stripe sent me back to the browser, also with JSON. So I need a couple of things. I need JSON, because the Stripe API is pretty dependent on JSON. And also, we need the Stripe API on in our libraries. So let me just quickly add that. POM.xml. I'm just going to add, first of all, I'm just going to add JSON. It is in Spring Boot's dependency management. I'm also going to add Stripe Java, which is Stripe's Java API, basically. And also, I can tell you something which basically cost me hours trying to code this once. Now, Spring Boot uses Jackson by default, the JSON marshaller. I added JSON, and there are some edge cases where it's a problem when you have both on the class path. So I need to make sure to exclude Jackson, actually. And because I never know how to do it, I'm going to search for Spring Boot, make JSON default. Let's see. And there's, I'm a simple guy. I'm just going to click the first link on Google so I can see, here's my JSON that I added already. There seems to be a property, but I know a better way than the property. When I go down right, I can actually exclude starter JSON from starter web. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to copy that in here. And then I see a ton of people struggle with that. You need to hit that button here in the upper right. Reload your Maven changes, otherwise that stuff won't work. Right, so hopefully I can see my libraries here. I have Stripe here, right? And I have JSON on my class path. That looks good. Let's go back to my payment controller. So the request body is the payment class, create payment class. Let's put that in here, create payment. And actually I cannot autocomplete that class, so it means it must be from the tutorial. Let's go back to the tutorial. It's these two classes, these DTO classes we saw earlier, right? So I'm just gonna, again, paste them in here. Now, the interesting thing is, some people have issues with just copy and pasting their code, immediately thinking of, where do I need to put these classes? What's the perfect package structure? The funny thing is, what I want to come to is that you have such a powerful IDE, you can essentially do anything that you want with these classes. So for example, if I'm fed up with create payment living inside here, I'm just going to say, well, I can move create payment to an upper level. I can make it its own class. And I don't want to put it into a controller package, for example. I can put it into a DTO package, which doesn't yet exist. And IntelliJ will just create it for me. And then I could say, well, hey, why is the controller just in the controller package? That controller should be in a web package. So I'm going to create a web package. I'm just going to move my controller and everything. I'm just going to move it inside the web package. The same with the DTO package. So you can use your IDE to your advantage and just use all these refactorings and not be scared of having the perfect structure at the very beginning. Right, payment controller. Let me see, what else do we have? We have our create payment response. Let me just quickly move that also. Right, so we have these two classes. These are just DTOs that the browser sends to our server, and the server sends back to the browser. Let me just have a quick, tiny look at the questions, because I saw when yes, you can see my shortcuts that I'm using on the bottom of the screen. What you want to do in the POM XML is you want to click Alt Insert to insert these Maven packages, Maven dependencies, and you get autocomplete and whatnot, and you can just search for them. It's a handy shortcut, pretty much. Alt Insert, not just Alt Enter, if you're inside the POM XML file. Right. Back to our endpoint. This is Stripe specific API. We want to create a payment intent that is Stripe specific API again. And at the end, we just want to return a payment response. Like so. Someone, a streamer I'm watching, said that when you're coding and streaming at the same time, you have 50% of your brain power. And it sounds about right that you have 50% of your brain power talking while coding. So even with this now, I said earlier, I just put a void return type here, because what I like to do is I just say return new create payment response, hit Alt Enter, and then let IntelliJ change the return type for me. I'm even that lazy. So I'm returning a create payment response. I know that this is a request body object coming in, a JSON object, create payment, right? And now let's have a look at what we do here. This is the call to Stripe, payment intent create with some parameters, which is basically a simple builder object. We want to say USD, dollars. And the amount is, what did we say? What did we have on our page? I don't know at the moment. I'm just going to put $15 here. We can change that later. And Stripe always wants cents. So that's why I'm multiplying by 100 here, $15 times 100. And this creates a payment intent on the Stripe side. It basically says there's a user who wants to pay $15 on your page. Please create a payment intent. That's what the front end needs. And actually you can see the create payment, the object we're sending in, isn't even being used at the moment because it was used here, create payment. What product does user want to buy? How much does product cost? Yeah. So now that we're just hard coding the price, we don't even need the object that is being sent in. Right. Spring Boot is just auto configuration. This is what you're seeing is Spring Boot, yes, and it's auto configuration, yes. And if you want to have a look at the guides again on my page, there's a guide, what is Spring Framework? There's a guide, what is Spring Boot and whatnot. You can also take my course. Literally, they tell you everything you need to know about what I'm doing here and what's happening behind the scenes. If you are uncomfortable with post mappings and these annotations and what is going on here. Yeah, so please have a look at my site, at my guides first, and then try to basically re-implement this. Okay, this is another question from Tensun. Silly question, not using final vars for payment related classes. I'm not using any final vars at the moment. This is not even omitted for brevity at the moment. This is just omitted for I want to get something done as quickly as possible. Actually, let me create, I think I need to create a couple of, let me see, for JSON. This is omitted because I want to take, I'm doing this, imagine I'm doing this for the very first time. And the only thing I want to do is I want to get started as quickly as possible. So I don't want to think about, for now, at the moment, again, should everything be, should it be final, should it not be final? Should I use constructor injection? Should I use field injection, whatever? I want to take that tutorial and get basically a quick bang for the buck. It doesn't mean we're going to end up with dirty code later on. No, we're going to make it as clean as possible. But I want to do it on the fly, basically. Yeah. So for now, I'm just going to quickly copy and paste and get done with it. We have our payment controller, and there's nothing to see at the moment. There's nothing to do, nothing exciting going on here. We need our step number 2 from that Stripe tutorial, which is the checkout page. Let's have a quick look. The browser. So step number 1, that's what we did. We set up the server. We added Stripe Java to our POM XML file. We created a payment intent and we just copy and pasted that code. We didn't test it. That's another thing. Test next episode. I just want to get it done manually. See that it's just working just once. Again, no TDD, no BDD, no nothing, no Kubernetes at this point. Just get done with it. I can see build a checkout page on the client, load Stripe.js, define a payment form, initialize Stripe.js, fetch a payment intent, initialize Stripe elements. Oh boy, a checkout form, create a cart element. Ooh, that looks like a lot of stuff. And if I'm looking at it, there is quite a long JavaScript file here on that page, and I'm just going to copy that. For now, we're not going to go through it line by line. We're just going to hope that the tutorial does something right. Client.js file. Let's go back to the server. Static client.js. I'm just going to paste it in here. Right. The only thing that is interesting for now, we're gonna see that JavaScript in action in a second. But the only thing that's going to happen is there seems to be that JavaScript fetches my endpoint, the one I just built, create payment intent with some JSON, and then does something, a fair amount of something. And that is something that you can have a look at either after the stream, but I'm just going to show you the important parts of that JavaScript file once we have our HTML page. So client.js, we have that, which is not yet an HTML file. Let's go back. That was not the right. There's so many windows open. You can only see half of my screen. I have a second screen where your chat messages are popping up, where I have my streaming software open. So I'm trying to get everything done the right way. Back to our tutorial. There seems to be a checkout HTML page. Right. I'm going to be lazy now. I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to hope when I open the page up that it shows me something exciting. So I'm just going to go inside here. I'm going to call it index a template, right? And paste in that HTML, which seems rather simple for now. It's just a form which has one div where Stripe injects the credit card element where you can enter the credit card number and whatnot. You have a button, a pay button. You have an error paragraph, and you have a success message. It sounds fairly simple. It references the client.js file we just added, and we have a global CSS file, which we haven't yet. So let's get in some styles, actually. Global CSS. And I think if I saw that right, the tutorial showed me that global CSS file as well. Yes, it did. So I'm just gonna, well, look at that. Lines and lines of CSS. We're just gonna copy that. Like so. We have our index.html file, and I'm going to create a tiny web controller. It's a bit premature, but I know that when you go to later on, I need to put in some variables. So into that home page, let's return a string, return index, right? I know in a second that I essentially, when I call the index page, I need to put in my Stripe API keys and whatnot. So I'm just preparing for that. But now let's actually see if what I'm doing here is working, if I forgot something, if everything is correct. If you can already tell me you did it wrong, Marco, there's something missing, there's a lot of stuff missing. Let's see once we boot up and we go to the index page, if anything is working at all. So I booted up everything. Localhost 8080, look at that. I have a page where I can enter my credit card number, I have a pay button, and hold on a second, I think that page, when I do an inspect, hopefully you guys can see that here, create payment intent, there seems to be a 500. The page calls my create payment endpoint. Set your Stripe API key. Yes, there's something missing, but it actually worked. So what happened is that this website tried to call my server, my Spring Boot application. My Spring Boot application tried to call Stripe, and I just was missing my API key. Let us change that, because that looked already really good. Actually, there's a cool thing about the Stripe documentation. Let me just find the documentation by so many windows. I'm already a bit confused. When you go up, you can see in the document here in Server Java, there is a Stripe API key, and it's actually because I'm logged in, it is my test API key. Please don't take that API key now. I'm going to change it after the session. It's just for testing. But when you register your Stripe account, you'll get your own Stripe API key. So just copy that. It's really live documentation and something I really, really appreciate. So now I don't have to go to the Stripe dashboard, find my API key. I can just take that code example and it just simply works. Now, Stripe API key, where are we going to put the Stripe API key? Actually, because we have to just set it once, I'm going to make it simple. I'm going to put it into my Spring Boot application. I'm just going to set it here, right? That should hopefully do the trick, because you only have to set it once on the Java side. And we also have to make it configurable in a second, actually, because I have a different key in my live production systems. So let's see what my payment form says. My payment form says that the create payment request worked with a 200, which is pretty cool. Which means I have a credit card payment form already. Let me show you what that means. Let me enter a number here, hit pay, and it says payment succeeded. See the result in your Stripe dashboard. What is happening? What is happening? Let me open that. Let me open that dashboard, the Stripe dashboard. So I'm here in my Stripe test data dashboard. And you can see, well, someone just paid $15 with a Stripe card or with a credit card. The amount is $15 converted to 12 euros roughly. The exchange rate, there seems to be a fee of 60 cents. Yeah, so I'm getting 11 euros 51 and whatnot. It seems like that payment already worked, which is pretty crazy. So we didn't do that much. What we did is we created one endpoint, pasted in a bit of JavaScript on the front end side, and suddenly we can talk with Stripe already and do actual payments. Let me show you a couple of tricks though, because it's not so simple. What we essentially did is Stripe has, and that is a very cool feature of Stripe, Stripe has test card numbers. So we're hooked up with Stripe, but there's essentially, the question is, can I just put in any number here? And no, there's a set of test numbers you can use from Stripe to trigger successful payments, to trigger two-factor authentication, the 3D secure authentication and whatnot, to trigger declined payments, all that kind of stuff. And when you search for the testing on the Stripe side, you can see 424242 is a very popular Stripe testing number for a Visa card. It works with any date and any 3 digits and whatever. You just paste it in, it works. But you can also use MasterCards, American Express and whatnot. And when I scroll down, for example, I can see here's my 3D secure test card numbers. So let me just copy that number, which I couldn't remember, refresh my page, paste in the number here with any expiry date, any zip code. The last one here is a zip code. Let's hit pay and let's see what happens. And what happens is that the Stripe JavaScript opens up a test two-factor authentication. That is what your bank would usually do. They would send you a text message, a push-up notification, whatever. It's all handled by Stripe's JavaScript file. And now you can say, well, complete the authentication, fail the authentication. When you hit complete, again, the JavaScript, without the data ever going to your server, handles all the communication between the browser and Stripe. Let's see. That should have worked again. A new payment. Another $15 with a different Visa card. And I can even see the payment was verified with 3D Secure, and that worked as expected. Pretty cool. And I see that chat is going down, which means the chat doesn't think it is as cool as I'm thinking it is, but I think it's pretty sexy to get started with just a couple of lines of JavaScript. But let me just see, Alexander, how can we be sure that our post controller is called from our index page and not from an external site? Yes, we would need, that's a very good point, we would need to protect against that. We would need to do a ton of protections. And again, this is something to get started with payment endpoints. This is rather simple. And then at the end, the question is, how can we make everything secure so that not someone is creating payment intents without, payment intents and payment intents. But the thing is, with a payment intent itself, you cannot do anything. So it's just something like the user wants to pay something. But again, we would need to make sure to really clean things up and do that. Yeah, that is something to keep in mind. Very good point. What I so far didn't show is, again, the JavaScript. I just said it's a huge page that we copied from the tutorial. And let me just quickly go through that client.js page that I just copied out of the tutorial just once and start at the top again. So I said this block basically here is when the user goes to the page, you create a payment intent. And the payment intent, our server calls Stripe, user wants to pay, returns a secret. Yes, that's what we basically get, back the secret. And then the Stripe has a JavaScript library, which is called Stripe Elements. And what you can see here, and I'm just going over this here, is when you call elements create on a specific div in our example, then Stripe will insert this credit card payment form into the div. That's what that code basically does. You create a card and you mount it to a div, and then you get that really nicely working credit card payment form with the credit card number, with the CVC, expiry date and whatnot. You get that from Stripe. And you can obviously choose to change the styles and whatnot, but this is everything that comes with the Stripe.js that we include at the top of our HTML file. Right. And then at the end, what you'll see is that we have our payment form. This is our HTML form, just our payment form. We have a JavaScript submit listener called pay with card. And what pay with card does is, again, it calls Stripe API. It calls Stripe confirm card payment, basically, with that card div where you entered all the details. Right. So this is just quickly what my custom JavaScript code does from the tutorial and also what the Stripe API does. But in the end, it is really just two calls. You create a payment intent, and then at the end, you have to call at some point the real payment happens here, the confirm card payment. So you just say, boom, the user wants to pay, put in the client secret. This is the secret from the payment intent. You put in the card that the user submitted, and everything happens between Stripe and the browser. And my server never sees your data. Why are you not using promise with try catch? It's very simple because, Fuad, if you started watching this stream from the beginning, you see that everything I did here, I copy and pasted that code from the Stripe docs. And what is very important for me to tell you is that at the beginning of my career, so I started developing professionally over a decade ago. It was very important for me to say, this is right, this is wrong, you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong, why are you not doing this, why are you not doing that? And now I just want to be pragmatic. I want to get everything done. I'm just going to copy and paste the code. This code works. It's not about nitpicking about why didn't you use JavaScript, why are you just using plain JavaScript, not React, not Quarkus, not everything else. So I just want to get away from the fixation on technology because I really want to get a working payment card form done sooner or later, hopefully. And we have yet some stuff to do. It's already 46 minutes. I'm just seeing I have a timer running, 46 minutes, and I need to hurry up a tiny bit. because we need to do some more before we actually deploy this whole thing. All right, we have the credit card payment working. And yes, I am a German. That's true, right? There's just something that we need to prepare for. I already told you that when I went to my payments, where was it? In my application, there was a Stripe API key. Actually, let's make a quick property out of it. I'm just going to call it Stripe API key. For now, I'm just going to put that in here, like so. Going back, I know I'm just going to inject it, and please don't kill me because I'm using field injection here. Stripe API key, like so. And in my client.js, I can also see there's a public key I'm using. And we're just going to fake that Stripe public key quickly. We're going to reference a variable here, which we have yet to declare. Stripe public key. Just going to put that in here, like so. And we're just going to quickly add this public key here. So var Stripe public key. I hope that is what the variable was called. Let's see. Stripe public key. We're going to put it in here. I always have to look up how I need to do Thymeleaf JavaScript inlines. So how to inline JavaScript with Thymeleaf? Yes. Let me see my code. The block, yeah, I think that should work just fine. Corresponds to a text. Let's see. That is obviously not entirely what I wanted. Let's see. Like so. Equals Stripe public key. Right? Let me actually double check because that doesn't look about right. I guess I'm missing something. If someone from the stream already knows what I'm missing, please let me know with the inlines. The inline, right. This is actually the example. I usually go to I always go to that page, that simple page. I never know how to inline stuff. And then I just copy this inside here. So yes, that is what I wanted. Stripe public key. It is a Stripe public key. Let's set it to null by default. And it's also very important to just show that sometimes you just copy and paste. And sorry for using that second link, which was old and which was cruel and whatever, but sometimes you just need to copy and paste stuff, right? Stripe public key. Stripe public key is the property Stripe public key, and we need to still set that. We're going to set it here, model add attribute, Stripe public key, like so. We're just going to create a field, a value field, Stripe public key. So the Stripe public key is in the properties file. It gets injected into the web controller. It gets set to the model of the homepage. And inside the homepage, it is being set to Stripe public key before the client.js. And finally, client.js picks it up. Let's see if our payment is still working. I'm just going to restart the application, actually, see if that works as expected, right? So let me open up. Let's go away from concrete page. Oh, there was a ton of ads. Yeah, that was a bad page. But as you can see, I can still open up my payment form. When I pay, I see the payment succeeded. So everything that we did worked. And just to take that away, these properties, I already put a properties file on my live server. And on my live server, I have my real Stripe key. So hopefully later on, the real payments will work with the Stripe keys, because the beauty about Stripe is the API and everything else is exactly the same. It doesn't matter if you're testing, it doesn't matter if production, it's the same endpoints. The only difference is your keys, which makes inserting the keys let's say a 4i principle thingy on production. That's that. I left a script. Thank you very much. That's the beauty of having the other 50% inside the chat, helping me out with these leftover tags. Right. After 50 minutes, we have the front-end flow working. What I now wanted to do, and what is already important, hopefully in the last half hour, before we deploy this thing, is Stripe sends me back that someone paid something. So the browser isn't talking to me, but I'm getting a synchronous webhook from Stripe. And that's what we need to have a look at now next. So let's actually see in the documentation from Stripe, one of the 50 million tabs I have open. We did setting up the server. We did building a checkout page on the client. That looks beautiful. Completing the payment on the client. That was the JavaScript we had a look at earlier, right? And again, please feel free to step through the documentation on your own time. We tested the integration. We ran the server. We made a couple of test payments. So that actually looks pretty cool already. Now, Stripe tells me not two things. Hey, you could make us, i.e. Stripe, send an email receipt. Let's click that option. Yeah, it's not too bad. And they say, well, just add a email field to your payment form. This is something we can quickly do. So I'm just going to put in, actually, I forgot something. So welcome to the transparent software developer. Let's make it a bit nicer and maybe make it bold. So we know on what page we are. And also, if you hit pay, if you hit the pay button, you will be billed. What did we say? Did we say we will bill 15 USDs for now? Right, just making the form a bit nicer. We now have an email field. Let's also make that required, so people have to enter that, right? And back, sorry for all this switching. I just entered the email field, and I guess I need to change some JavaScript. Yes, I do. This Stripe confirm card payment call, which we saw earlier, we just need to add our receipt email there. So let's do that. And that seems to be it. Interesting note again is, how can we test that? How can we test that Stripe sends out these receipt emails and that everything is correctly? There's a ton of testing questions, which is super interesting to get into in the next episodes. But the funny thing is Stripe even doesn't send emails for test payments, so only in production. And there's a couple of interesting challenges ahead testing all of this stuff. So receipt email, I'm just going to copy and paste that in, right? In our client.js, there was somewhere confirm card payment, right? That looks about right. So I'm just going to put that in here. I'm not going to test it now, just manually hope that praying that everything is working as expected. And just to answer a couple of questions, why the title Transparent Software Developer? Because I thought I'm being transparent. You can see me code. It's unscripted. It is. So I did code it once, but it's not like I have a script lying around here and then everything being picture perfect. I just want to be transparent about what I'm doing here and what you can expect. So you can watch me over the shoulder, and that's why it's transparent. And as for is Stripe better than Klarna and whatever, there's a ton of different payment providers. Stripe is really easy to get started with. It accepts credit cards, and that is everything we want to do in this stream, accepting credit card payments. So it's not about one being by miles better than the other, and there's even many more payment providers, right? What is the best way to protect your API key, by the way? The best way to protect your API key is to not certainly not push it somewhere. I would refrain from, especially with payments, just posting it on a public repo or whatever. You could obviously choose to encrypt it, and you would need to have more technology on top of it. So it's not something I can get into in this episode. But for now, I'm hoping you're not abusing my test Stripe key. Right. Now, let's go back to the browser again, because we're not yet finished with the tutorial. Safeguard after payment is something that doesn't fit into this stream. So the thing is, when you do the payment now, I never know basically what your card details were and whatnot, and they're lost. But if I implement the safeguard after payment workflow, I get a token from Stripe which identifies you. And which means if you want to purchase something again on my website, you do not have to enter your credit card details again. I can just use your token to issue those payments, which I guess we can do in later episodes. But finally, what I wanted to come to, after the payment, fulfillment. Set up a webhook to fulfill orders after payment succeeds. That is exactly what we want to do. We need a webhook because Stripe sends us stuff back. And on that, we need to create a customer, we give you access, enable, later on an ebook, downloads and whatever you bought, essentially. That all happens on that webhook. And what you can see is, again, it's a long tutorial, set up an endpoint, handle requests from Stripe, test a webhook. Next question is, how do you test a webhook? That's very interesting. So the thing is, you have a webhook. How do you spawn these events? And Stripe has a couple of very nice tools, but again, to test your webhooks. But again, it doesn't really suit the TDD approach, because there's no way you're just going to start out, I have my test now, I want to fulfill that, and then use the Stripe CLI tool to spawn webhook responses. You can do that, but first of all, get used to the Stripe API. So, where were we? We have our webhook, and also we need to, the same problem with the create payment intents, we need to secure our webhook because otherwise anyone could send us stuff which we don't really want. And I can actually already, put the secure your webhook inside here. Toggle that feature so I can see the code. And as you can see, it's just one server class. Again, it's Spark. I mentioned it at the beginning. I don't want to do anything with Spark. I'm having Spring Boot, so it's just going to be a webhook controller. And I'm just going to copy that code here, which looks like it does roughly what I'm about to do. Let's see. I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to create a new controller. I'm going to call it Stripe Webhook Controller for now. It's a REST controller. Post mapping. I actually know already there's something on the live system. I have Stripe configured that it sends webhooks to Stripe/events. So I need to make it call Stripe events. And public void handle Stripe event, for example, and paste in that wall of code. And again, I hope we're going to make it a bit simpler in a second. Now, let's see what it does here. Replace this endpoint secret with your endpoint's unique secret. So there seems to be an endpoint secret we need. Again, new property, endpoint secret. Value. And I cannot tell you how often I forgot to put in the dollars here and whatnot. I'm actually happy. Stripe webhook secret. Actually, let me just double check. And hopefully you cannot see that on a different screen. I just need to quickly double check what the property is called on the live system. So that in a second, when we're going to deploy this thing, webhook secret, that looks about right. Webhook secret. I'm overriding the correct properties. Right, so we have that. This is fine. Post webhook, we don't need that. We don't need that. The webhook is always supposed to return a status 200. If you're not returning a status 200, then Stripe sends you these webhooks again and again, I think 3 times by default. So it doesn't matter if you have an error on your side or whatever, always return a 200 once you accepted a webhook event. So we're going to return a string here. Then let's see, this here is actually not what we need. This is just manual parsing of stuff. Let me make that real simple. This is a bit quick really, but I don't want to spend a ton amount of time going through every line of this webhook code, but they're going to send a header, a signature header, which I need to have a look at to see if the event that comes in is basically a real event from Stripe or an event that you guys just forked. Right. Then let's see if the endpoint secret, if the endpoint secret, if the SIG header is null, we just return right this, like so. Let me just import all these Stripe specific classes. I'm just hitting Alt Enter. A ton of Stripe specific classes. Right, the Stripe object, event get type, right. We need an event. And the only thing what I'm going to do is actually that's one thing I like is instead of system out println, I like to use loggers. So I'm just going to put in a logger here, get a reference to a logger, like so. And instead of system out println down here, I'm just going to go, hey, someone of you guys sent in an event which has an invalid signature. And we need to put in the string payload, request body string payload, like so. So we're going to get a string event basically from, and by the way, Stuart, thank you for importing all, for the shortcut of importing all imports. Something that I rarely use. Someone tells me every year or so that I could just use that import. But I always tend to forget it. So thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. Yeah. So the payload, we have that payload comes in as a string. There's a Stripe specific API where it says, let's try to create a event class, a Stripe specific event class from that string, from the endpoint secret, which we have yet to configure, and from our header, from our signature header that it also comes in. And this method will fail if someone is trying to spoof the event. And then what happens is there's a ton of amount of Stripe code going on. There's basically, we're going to switch through the event. And this here, the payment intent is where it's at. Payment intent succeeded means the user paid something. The other ones we don't even need. And I'm just going to go quickly. I'm just also here. I'm just going to go, the payment succeeded. So I'm just going to go payment succeeded, paste that in here instead of the string concatenation. And payment method attached, we don't need. And here we're just going to go logger1, for example. There's an unhandled event type. Something happened, like so. And in real life, in the next episodes or so, we would have a method handled payment intent succeeded, and this will need to do something. So save the use in a database, and I'm afraid we won't be able to make that in this episode because we're already past 65 minutes of this stream. But save a use in a database, save the payment information, the token in a database, enable the login and whatever. That would have to happen in that handled payment intent succeeded method. Right. Now, there's still a point, Stripe webhook secret. What is the Stripe webhook secret? We need to have that property. Let me see. We need to put something in here. And now the question is, where does that webhook secret come from and how can I test my webhook that it works? Do I now need to configure, in the Stripe dashboard, configure somehow my local host URL? I mean, I'm developing locally, so I would need like a service like ngrok where Stripe could send a message to a specific URL, which forwards it to my localhost 8080. That is certainly possible. That is something you can do. But Stripe has a pretty wicked command line tool, which you'll find about in this, hopefully somewhere at the end. It said you have download, finally there it is. It says download the Stripe CLI, which is a command line tool. You can install it and you can log into your Stripe account with that command line tool. And then you can call this here. I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to show you live what this thing does. So what it does is basically, it says everything that comes in, a payment in test mode, redirected to localhost 8080 Stripe events. So forward everything to my localhost 8080, which is pretty cool. And it gives me a secret. That's a secret we've been missing. So I can just paste that in here. So without that command line tool, it would be a bit tricky to test this whole thing, yeah? But just download it, install it, configure it, you get a secret and you're good to go. Now, let me see if that actually worked. There's one tiny, I'm just going to restart. I just want to make sure that I have my Stripe webhook controller. Did we miss anything in the stream? So there's payment succeeded. We're just logging out that the payment succeeded basically at the moment. That should hopefully work. My payment controller, I'm just double checking things here, is a REST controller, post mapping Stripe events. So actually, let's give it a try. Let's see if this thing works. Localhost 8080. Look at that. Welcome to the Transparent Software Developer. If you hit the pay button, you'll be billed $15 US. My email address is marco@marcobela.com. The card number, I'm just going to enter the test card number, 424242, with random data. Pay. Then the payment worked. So, well, that worked already before. Let's see what happens. You can see that the command line tool says it got a couple of payment intent created, payment intent succeeded. So it already forwarded everything to localhost 8080/Stripe/events. So that seemed to work quite okay. And if I open up my, my console here, and I hope you guys can see that, you can see my Stripe webhook controller says the payment succeeded for $15. It does it twice. Don't be scared that thinking that the payment happened twice. It's the same payment, but Stripe sends me the event a couple of times because it took me too long to basically acknowledge it. You always have to imagine the event can come one too many times, and you can actually see it. Let me just redo that. For ID, if you enter out the payment intent ID, you'll see it's the same payment intent. It's not a duplicate payment, essentially, yeah, that happened. So don't be scared, but again, to harden things up, we would need to make sure that this stuff works flawlessly and we don't register user twice and we don't, save his payment method twice. So we always have to take care of all of these kind of things, yeah? Right, let me just quickly try that again. I'm just going to refresh that page. Marco@blah. I'm just getting a bit lazy entering my number here. Right. I'm just going to go pay again. Right. I can see again in the console that worked flawlessly. And I can see the payment intent for ID. You can see, hopefully you guys can see that my face is not over it. Now it looks a bit better. The payment for ID, so it's the same idea, but just getting the event multiple times. So there's no duplicate payments. So yes, John, we have to worry about idempotency a bit. Yeah, that is very cool. And we have to worry about testing a bit because now imagine we want to run automated tests for our webhook controller. Does that mean we need to put our Stripe CLI tool into a Docker container, run it in our build pipeline and spawn these payments and whatnot? There's a ton of discussions around that. And we can only figure it out in the next sessions, basically. Do we need the command in production auto? We don't need the command in production because what we do is in production, and I cannot show you that because Otherwise, you would see my live Stripe API keys and whatnot. There's a setting in Stripe where you say any payments you get, please send them to a URL, to a specific URL. And I already configured that URL to send it to livemarcobela.com/stripe/events. So you don't need that CLI tool in real life. You just need to make sure you have an endpoint which works and which is there and responds to these events, basically. Good. I think if card 42 is designed for success. Yes, card 42 is basically my prime test card for Stripe. So 42, 42, 42. I type that number so often. It's an interesting number. I don't know any of the other test numbers off the top of my head. I always have to copy and paste them. But 42, 42, 42 gives me good feelings, basically. Yeah. So Tensan, jar it and ship it. What can possibly go wrong? Sorry about that. You're absolutely right. I should stop talking. Let me just do exactly what you guys said. So I'm just going to call package here. I'm just going to jar it and ship it. So you can do it in the command line. I'm just going to pack everything up without any tests, yeah? But you saw everything I did. There's no magic involved so far. So we have that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up I'm on Windows. I'm going to open up a WSL shell, basically. And I'm just going to quickly go to users screencasts. What is the folder called? Stripe payments. Right. I have my target folder. I have my jar file. I'm just going to copy that. And that is basically what, again, what's going on here, Walter? I don't know how you got that recommended. We're basically building a payment form, and you're happy to, when that shit goes live in a second, to enter your credit card details in a payment form. But otherwise, you can always go back and have a look at what we did. Though you have to watch 70 minutes or so of content up until now. So what I'm going to do is, again, very simple, and this is so important for me. Very simple deployment for the beginning. We have a jar file. We just want to copy it to a server. We don't want to Dockerize it. We don't want to Kubernetes it, whatever. We don't want to scale and whatnot. So I'm very happy that I'm very confident that the application, my server, which is one of the cheapest, I think a $3 server, whatever, will handle you guys, a couple of guys going to that page. So I'm just going to copy that to the live.marcobela.com server. I have my SSH keys set up in the background. And on that server, I have var www. I have historically, again, convention that I do it like so. I put my codes under www, the domain name, and then folder Java, for example, right? So we're just going to copy that. That is the deployment. And now, yes, we have to do the deployment manually. So live.marcobela.com, Java. Let's see what's in here. That is my old file that I deployed once. But we're going to do what hopefully you guys can see that. Yes, I think you can see that. We're going to boot it up and see what happens. Let's see. I'm actually pretty excited to see if that is happening. So the application started in 5 seconds, which means if I go now, let me see if that actually works. live.marcobela.com. It opens up a credit card payment page. Dude, my heart is actually a bit pumping, yeah? So it's deployed. You can go to live.marcobela.com. Let me have a look at my server. So there's nothing happening just yet that I saw. So actually, everything is working as expected. No error messages, no nothing. So I did it, and everything we did so far seems to be working. Right. Now, obviously, is the time if you want to really see if it's working, put into your email address, put into your real credit card number, make me a happy man. Right. Hit the pay button. You will be billed $15 US. You will not get them back, just to say that once. But otherwise, let me just breathe for a tiny second. I am pretty happy that all of this stuff worked, because I wasn't a couple of weeks ago, I was not entirely sure that I could really pull it off because the live coding and the talking and then having a look at the chat. So when I'm looking over to the side is always, it's pretty challenging, it's pretty challenging. Also having people who might say, you're doing it wrong and whatnot. And I thought for one night, I thought, man, I'm going to scratch it. I'm not going to pull it off. And then I slept over it for one night and I thought, let's give it a try. I'm just going to code through this example, see how far we can go. I initially wanted to do the whole database stuff also, but we're already at 1 hour, 20 minutes. And it's Sunday evening and I don't want to spend another half an hour adding databases and whatnot on the webhook controller. But I noticed I can actually pull it off. I can get something to run, make it somewhat hopefully interesting and exciting. And just deploy something, dogfooding, having skin in the game, making something that works and that you can actually use. As for the server, yeah, db equals new db done. Yeah, almost. I wanted to make it a bit more professional. What I'm using is, I'm not using AWS. What I'm really falling back to is Hetzner, a German company, super cheap. And the server I'm using basically is, I think I'm using the cloud server. Let me show you which one. I think I'm using the €4.50 one a month. Yeah, so you can essentially use any server you want. Doesn't really matter too much. The €2.96 one would have also worked. Just displaying one web page and routing some payment data for this live stream. That's pretty much it. Yeah. But to come to some sort of a close, I need to, if you have feedback on that session, if you liked it, if you enjoyed it, please let me know, not just in the chat, send me a mail to marco@marcobila.com or info@marcobila.com what you thought about it. I need to see what the feedback is, how valuable you guys found that session, how I can pull it off, and how we can, if I can continue streaming, because it's quite time intensive. And even though it's unscripted, there's a ton of preparation going into this so that the technological side and stuff works like that. But I'll need to figure it out. And I'd like to get in touch with you guys per mail and just chat with you what you thought, what you think, and how we can do it, how we can pull it off. Other than that, the only thing I can say is thank you guys for watching this. You're very welcome, and I really enjoyed doing that. Enjoy. Have a good. Actually, I just noticed. So one of the things I just noticed is you didn't even see me now in big. So just one final big face of mine. Just saying goodbye. Have a nice Sunday, or have a nice evening, night, day, afternoon, whatever. Wherever you're watching. Enjoy. I am out. Have a good one.